It is against U.S. law to be involved in torture or conspiracy to commit torture, and it is also...
I can tell you two things. One, that we abide by the law of the United States. We do not torture. And two, we will try to do everything we can to protect us within the law. We do not render to countries that torture. That has been our policy, and that policy will remain the same.
For 10 years, the American CIA has been secretly abducting people and flying them to be tortured. It's called Extraordinary Rendition, and we talked to the man who helped devise it.
I was part of a team that put it together. The purpose was to protect Americans, to get someone off the street who either had been or could be involved in a terrorist operation against the United States.
This next story is one the government didn't want you to know about, probably because it shows just how terribly wrong the so-called war on terror went 5 years ago. Details about what happened to a Canadian software engineer in the fall of 2002 are just now coming to light, and it is a terrifying tale that says a lot about our country today. Keeping them honest, here's CNN's Jason Carroll.
We now know Washington wanted to keep this story a secret. It was 2002 at JFK Airport in New York, almost exactly 1 year after the terrorist attack of 9/11. A husband is flying home on American Airlines Flight 65. He has a layover here to change planes, and then suddenly, he simply disappears. He never gets home to Canada.
He told me, "I'll call you as soon as I arrive in Montreal."
Her husband, Meher Arar, was stopped at JFK. U.S. Customs agents told him something he didn't know, that he was on the U.S. terror watch list.
They told me, you are not a suspect. We're just going to ask you some questions and we'll let you catch the next plane, but this did not happen.
No one said why, he says, but Arar was arrested and soon moved to this detention center in New York. Hours would pass, then a day, then longer. He was allowed no calls. Arar's wife was in a panic. She called the airlines, the Canadian embassy. No one could tell her anything. It was as if he'd vanished.
I was just left waiting. And that wait without nothing.
In New York, a federal INS agent told Arar they suspected he was affiliated with Al-Qaeda, a charge Arar vehemently denied. The agent said they were flying him to Syria. Arar was stunned. He'd left there 16 years ago to become a Canadian citizen.
I protested. I said, if you send me back to Syria, I'll be tortured.
In fact, the U.S. State Department's own literature says torture is most likely to occur under questioning in Syria.
And what did they say in response?
Well, they just didn't care.
Finally, 6 days after being taken into U.S. custody, Arar says he was allowed to call. His wife is relieved to hear from him and then horrified.
He said, "I'm in New York, I'm in Brooklyn, in Federal Prison Bureau, something like that, and I need a lawyer. I might be deported to Syria."
Arar begged the INS agent not to send him.
For me, it was very clear that the message is we don't care. That's why we are sending you to Syria. We're sending you there to be tortured.
I'm just wondering psychologically what that must have been like for you at that point.
I lost hope. I was disoriented. I just wanted a miracle to happen.
October 8th, 12 days after being held in U.S. custody, Arar is flown to Jordan, then Syria.
During the entire trip, frankly, I was constantly thinking about, once I am in Syria, how can I avoid torture? That was all I was thinking about.
Well, just ahead, we'll tell you what he faced when he finally reached Syria.
Recht, Justiz, wozu hat man Justiz und Rechte? Wir sind dem Politiker und Geheimdienste übergeben. Und Justiz ganz draußen, Recht ist ganz draußen. Also die ganze Zeit lag ich wie eine Mumie aufs Bett. Ich durfte mich nicht frei bewegen, selbst wenn ich auf Toilette muss. Die Vorhänge waren immer zu. Das war für mich wirklich anstrengend. Und je länger die Zeit geworden ist, habe ich immer ein bisschen mehr Angst bekommen. Weil ich könnte das nicht verstehen, warum halten Sie mich so lang und warum weigern Sie mir Kontakt zu meiner Familie oder zur Deutschen Botschaft oder einen Dolmetscher zu bringen. Nach ungefähr 7 Tagen ist einem Assistent in den Raum gekommen. Ich habe ihn gefragt, und was ist das? Dann hat er mir gesagt, ich soll sagen, ich sei von Al-Qaida. Dann darf ich mich in Skopje nicht mehr aufhalten. Dann würden sie mich im Flugzeug absetzen und nach Deutschland abschieben. Ich habe abgelehnt. Er hat immer wieder versucht, mich davon zu überzeugen. Ich habe ihm gesagt, er kann mich abschieben, ohne dass ich sage, ich sei von Al-Qaida. Ich bin nicht von Ich mir ganz kurz so in dem Kopf, weil man könnte in diesem Moment nicht denken oder sich vorstellen, weil es war man ein bisschen so sprachlos, so schockiert. Plötzlich wurde ich so reingebracht und dann Schläge von allen Seiten und die Hände nach oben gedreht und dann hat man mit scharfen Gegenständen die Kleider vom Leib runtergerissen. Ich war richtig schockiert. Und als die mir die Augen frei gemacht haben, habe ich gesehen, dass die Männer dort alle in schwarz gekleidet waren, schwarze Handschuhe, schwarze Masken und kein Wort haben die gesagt. Irgendwie ist mir ein bisschen so in den Kopf gekommen, die Bilder von Guantanamo. Und ganz besonders, nachdem die mir die Hände nach hinten und dann der Sack über den Kopf und das Ganze. Ich wurde halt so zusammengeschlagen und ich wurde schwer gedemütigt und erniedrigt. Über Einzelheiten möchte ich nicht sprechen, es belastet mich sehr.
They took the scalpel to my right chest. It was only a small cut, maybe an inch. At first, I just screamed. It was an agony, crying, trying desperately to suppress my feelings, but I was screaming.
Binyam Mohammed moved from Ethiopia to England in 1994. He sought asylum in the UK and made a life for himself in West London. What you are about to hear are sections from his diary read by his brother.
I sought asylum in Britain rather than America because it's known as the one country that has laws that it follows.
In 2001, Binyam travelled to Pakistan. Several months later, he attempted to fly home to the UK on a false passport and was arrested at Karachi airport.
Okay, here I have a diary of Binyam, and I'm gonna read from his diary for you. I refused to talk in Karachi until they gave me a lawyer. I said it was my right to have a lawyer. The FBI said the law has changed. There are no lawyers. You can cooperate with us the easy way or the hard way. On the first day of the interrogation, Chuck said, if you don't talk to me, you are going to Jordan. We can't do what we want here. The Arabs will deal with you.
After the interrogation, Binyam was handcuffed, blindfolded, and put on a flight to Morocco. He had just become a victim of extraordinary rendition.
They cut off my clothes with some kind of doctor's scalpel. I was totally naked. They took the scalpel to my right chest. It was only a small cut, maybe an inch. At first, I just screamed. One of them took my penis in his hand and began to make a cut. He did it once, and then stood still for maybe a minute, watched my reaction. It was an agony, crying, trying desperately to suppress my feelings, but I was screaming. There was blood all over. If I told you I was going to teach you, they cut all over my private parts. One of them said it would be better just to cut it off, as it would only breed terrorists. They used to be very slow, deliberately slow. One would cut me, they would take a rest, then another would take his turn.
Binyam was held in Morocco for 18 months. The torture continued the entire time he was there. In January 2004, Binyam was flown to Afghanistan. On his arrival, he was imprisoned in the notorious Dark Prison.
Then they cuffed me and put earphones on my head. They played hip-hop and rock music very loud, all night and all day. I couldn't take the headphones off. As I was cuffed, I had to sleep with the music on and even pray with it. For 18 months, there was not one night when I could sleep well. This mental torture was a lot worse than the physical torture. I think I came to several emotional breakdowns in this time, but who was there to turn to?
After spending 9 months in Afghanistan, Binyam was rendered again. He was blindfolded, handcuffed, and flown to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba.
Before the break, we told you the terrifying story about a Canadian software engineer who was arrested at New York's Kennedy Airport in 2002. He was told he was on the U.S. terror watch list, and 12 days later he was deported to Syria, his homeland, which he'd left years before, and where he knew that torture awaited him. This is a story the U.S. government did not want you to know about. Keeping them honest. Once again, here's CNN's Jason Carroll.
Meher Arar, an engineer, husband, and father, accused by U.S. officials of being affiliated with Al-Qaeda, now in a Syrian prison, awaiting interrogation.
I just wanted to end my life.
So look around in this room for anything at all.
Anything.
To kill yourself.
You know, I would rather die than, face torture.
Day 1, he says there were threats. Day 2, the beatings began.
He asked me, do you know what this is? And I said, yes, it's a cable. And he hit me like crazy. It was so painful to the point where I forgot every enjoyable moment in my life.
Interrogators accused Arar of training at a terrorist camp in Afghanistan. When he denied it, denied any connection at all. They beat him more.
They kept telling me all the time that I was lying to them.
Then he says they threatened electric shock.
Just to hear the screams of people being tortured, you would say to yourself, I'm going to tell them whatever they want me to say.
Nearly a year would pass before this would end. Arar remembered one especially violent session.
Because of fear, I couldn't control my muscles and my nerves anymore. So imagine the clothes that I urinated in. I kept them on. I kept them on for like 2 months. And that alone was like very humiliating.
And while his family had no idea where he was, his pain was made even worse because he had no idea if anything had also happened to them.
That alone was torture in its own. Not knowing, you see, I had all those scary thoughts in my mind. Are my kids being kidnapped like me? Is my wife being kidnapped?
Arar says the interrogators broke his will. He finally signed a confession he had received terrorist training in Afghanistan, a country he says he has never been to. And that same day he was released and sent back to Canada. 10 months and 10 days since he landed in New York, since he had last seen his family. 3 years later, an independent Canadian commission found the Royal Canadian Mounted Police had given the U.S. inaccurate and inflammatory information about Arar. Canada paid Arar's family $11.5 million. The Prime Minister apologized and said the U.S. should also clear Arar's name.
The Government of Canada has every right to go to bat for one of its citizens when the government believes a Canadian is being unfairly treated by another country.
Which brings us to today, more than 5 years since Arar's terrible ordeal began. The U.S. still has his name on the terror watch list. The Department of Justice says classified information shows he's a threat. So Arar is suing the federal government, alleging the U.S. rendered him to Syria to be tortured.
If this pillar of the justice system if its role is diminished, what is the difference then between the United States and other countries?
Keeping them honest, we wanted to know why Arar, who holds a Canadian passport, was sent to Syria. The Justice Department declined an interview. In a statement, it said it received assurances from Syria he would not be tortured, and Arar was lawfully deported. But during this congressional hearing 2 weeks ago, the Secretary of State admitted mistakes were made.
I'm aware of the inquiry, and as I said, we do not think that this case was handled as it should have been.
For Arar, that's not enough. He wants compensation and an official apology.
Do you think you're going to get what you're asking for here?
Things take time. Year, 2, 5 years, 10 years, but I'm hoping that one day the American government will do the right thing.